The alarm bells rang through the Earth Defense Command Center. Admiral Chen looked up from his morning coffee as the urgent red lights flashed across every screen in the room. 23 years of quiet had made these moments rare and terrifying. "Admiral, we have a contact at the edge of the solar system," Lieutenant Martinez called out, her voice tight with tension. It's impossible, sir." Chen walked quickly to the main display screen. The image showed a ship that looked familiar yet wrong. The hull design was definitely human, but it carried scars and modifications that no Earth shipyard had ever made. Strange metal patches covered sections of the hull, and the ship's energy signature made no sense at all. "Run the identification scan again," Chen ordered. His hands shook slightly as he waited for the results. Deep down, he already knew what the computer would tell him. "Sir, the ship is registering as the UES Meridian." "But that's impossible. The Meridian disappeared 23 years ago during the Hegemony invasion." The room fell silent. Everyone remembered the stories of the Meridian. It had been humanity's first real deep space exploration ship, launched just as the alien Hegemony had arrived to protect Earth. The ship had vanished into deep space while Earth was forced to accept alien rule and give up their dreams of exploring the galaxy. "Get me a communication link," Chen said, "and alert the Hegemony monitoring stations." "Sir, about the monitoring stations," Martinez said quietly. "They went dark the moment our sensors picked up the Meridian. All of them." At the same time, Chen felt a chill run down his spine. The Hegemony had placed dozens of monitoring stations throughout the solar system after their arrival. These stations watched everything humans did in space. They had never gone offline, not once in 23 years. The main screen flickered to life. A woman's face appeared, older than it should be, with scars across her cheek and eyes that had seen too much. Her hair was completely gray, though she should have been middle-aged by now. "This is Captain Sarah Okafor of the UES Meridian, requesting permission to approach Earth," she said. Her voice carried an authority that hadn't been there when she left. "Captain Okafor," Chen said carefully. "This is Admiral Chen of Earth Defense Command. We thought you were lost." Okafor smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "We were lost, Admiral, very lost. But we found something out there. Something important." "What do you mean? Where have you been for 23 years?" "Time moves differently when you travel as far as we did," Okafor replied. "We've been gone much longer than 23 years from our perspective. But that's not important right now. What's important is what we brought back." Chen looked at the energy readings from the Meridian again. The ship was putting out power levels that should have been impossible with human technology. Even the most advanced Hegemony ships didn't show readings like this. "Captain, our sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures from your ship. Can you explain?" Okafor was quiet for a long moment. "Admiral, how much do you know about the old stories? The legends that the Hegemony tells about ancient technology?" "I know some stories. Why?" "Because we found something that the Hegemony has been looking for across the entire galaxy. Something they're very afraid of." Before Chen could respond, another alarm began ringing. This one was different, louder, more urgent. Martinez looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Admiral, we have Hegemony ships moving toward Earth, multiple fleets. They're coming from every direction." Chen felt his stomach drop. "How many ships?" "More than we've ever seen in one place, sir. It looks like they're mobilizing everything they have in this sector." On the screen, Captain Okafor nodded grimly. "They know we're here. They can feel what we brought back, even with their stations down. Admiral, I need you to listen very carefully. The device we found, it changes everything. Not just for humanity, but for every species in the galaxy." "What kind of device?" "The kind that shouldn't exist. The kind that can rewrite the rules of physics itself. The Hegemony calls it the Unmaker in their old stories, but they're wrong about what it does. It doesn't unmake things. It makes them better. Much better." Chen looked around the command center. His officers were staring at the screens showing Hegemony fleets approaching from all directions. Earth's small defense fleet would be crushed in minutes if the aliens decided to attack. "Captain, if this device is so powerful, why haven't you used it to fight them off?" "Because using it changes you," Okafor said. "It changed all of us who survived the journey. We're not quite the same humans who left Earth 23 years ago, but we're still human, and we're still loyal to Earth. The question is whether Earth is ready for what we've become." The Meridian began moving closer to Earth, and Chen could see more details on the ship's hull. The strange metal patches weren't repairs, they were improvements. The ship looked like it had been rebuilt by people who understood technology far beyond anything humans had ever developed. "Captain, I need to know more about this device before I can authorize your approach to Earth." "The device is called the synthesis engine," Okafor said. "It was built by a species that existed billions of years ago. They hid it away because they realized it was too powerful for any one species to control. But Admiral, the Hegemony isn't coming here to talk. They're coming to take it. And if they get it, every free species in the galaxy will become their slaves forever." Chen made his decision. "Captain Okafor, you are authorized to approach Earth, but I want you to dock at the outer defense station, not at Earth itself. We need to understand what we're dealing with." "Understood, Admiral. But Chen, you should know. The crew that left Earth numbered 847 people. Only 312 of us made it back. The journey to find this device cost us more than half our people. But what we learned out there, it was worth it. Humanity doesn't have to be afraid anymore." The communication ended and Chen watched the Meridian approach the defense station. The ship moved in ways that seemed to ignore some basic laws of physics, turning without visible thrusters and accelerating faster than its mass should have allowed. "Sir," Martinez said quietly, "the Hegemony fleets will be here in 6 hours." Chen nodded. "Get me the President on a secure line, and wake up everyone in the science division. If Captain Okafor is right about this device, we're about to find out if humanity is ready to stop being victims." As the Meridian docked at the outer station, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For 23 years, humanity had lived under alien rule, forbidden from expanding beyond their own solar system. Now, one lost ship had returned with something that might change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The question was whether humanity was strong enough to handle that kind of responsibility, and whether they could survive what was coming when the Hegemony arrived to claim their prize. Captain Sarah Okafor stood in the briefing room of the outer defense station, facing Earth's most important leaders. President Williams, Admiral Chen, and the heads of Earth's Science Division sat around the table, all staring at the small crystal sphere that sat in the center of the room. The synthesis engine didn't look like much. It was about the size of a human head, made of some kind of crystal that seemed to shift and change color when nobody was looking directly at it. Sometimes it appeared clear as glass. Other times it looked like it contained entire galaxies swirling inside. "This is what we found," Okafor said simply. "The last creation of a species called the Architects. They existed billions of years ago, long before any of the current galactic powers even evolved." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Meridian's chief science officer, stepped forward. She had aged like the rest of the crew, her once black hair now streaked with white, but her eyes still held the excitement of a scientist who had discovered something incredible. "The Architects were masters of reality itself," Vasquez explained. "They learned how to manipulate the fundamental forces that hold the universe together. Matter, energy, space, time, all of these became tools they could use to reshape existence." President Williams leaned forward. "And this device can do the same thing?" "More than that," Vasquez said. "The synthesis engine can rewrite the laws of physics in a limited area around it. Within its field of influence, the impossible becomes possible. Your technology doesn't just work better. It works in ways that shouldn't be possible according to everything we thought we knew about science." Admiral Chen pointed at the device. "How does it work?" "We don't fully understand the mechanism," Okafor admitted. "But we know what it does. The engine reads the intentions and understanding of the people using it, then makes reality conform to what they need. If you need your ship to be faster, it becomes faster. If you need your weapons to be more powerful, they become more powerful. But it's not just about making things better. It's about making them work in completely new ways." Dr. Sarah Kim, head of Earth's physics division, looked skeptical. "That's impossible. You can't just change the laws of physics." "The laws of physics aren't really laws," Vasquez replied. "They're just descriptions of how reality normally works. The Architects learned that reality is much more flexible than we thought. The synthesis engine essentially tells reality to work differently within its range." "How big is this range?" President Williams asked. "We've tested it up to about 50,000 kilometers, Okafor said. But the Architect records suggest it can be expanded much further if needed. The device we found was set to minimum power. According to their database, a fully activated synthesis engine could affect an entire star system." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. If humanity could control physics itself within a 50,000 kilometer radius, They would be unstoppable in any space battle. You mentioned the Hegemony has been looking for this, Chen said. How do you know? Because we found their old records in the Architect ruins, Okafor said. The Hegemony isn't the original galactic power. They were slaves to an even older empire called the Dominion. The Hegemony found some Architect technology thousands of years ago and used it to overthrow their masters. They've been searching for more ever since, terrified that another species might find what they found. So they know what this device can do, Williams asked. They call it the Unmaker in their legends, Vasquez said. They believe it can destroy entire star systems, which is true. But they don't understand that it can create just as easily as it destroys. They think it's only a weapon. Admiral Chen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the approaching Hegemony fleets. Speaking of weapons, we have a more immediate problem. Long-range sensors show at least 50 Hegemony ships approaching Earth. They'll be here in 4 hours. 50 ships? President Williams looked pale. Our entire defense fleet is only 12 ships. Numbers don't matter anymore, Okafor said quietly. Watch. She walked over to a communication panel and spoke into it. Meridian, this is the captain. Activate the engine at level 2. The crystal sphere in the center of the room began to glow softly. Everyone in the room felt something change, though they couldn't quite say what. The air seemed to shimmer, and electronic devices around the room began displaying readings that made no sense. What's happening? Dr. Kim asked, staring at her tablet. My instruments are showing energy levels that shouldn't be possible. The engine is active, Vasquez explained. Reality within 50,000 kilometers of this station is now operating under enhanced physics. Your instruments are reading correctly. Energy and matter are behaving differently now. Through the window, they could see the Meridian docked at the station. The ship was beginning to change. Its hull grew smoother and more streamlined. Weapon ports that hadn't been there before appeared along its sides. The engine sections expanded and took on a blue glow that was visible even through the thick hull plating. The ship is adapting, Okafor said. The synthesis engine reads what we need and makes it happen. Right now we need a warship. So the Meridian is becoming the best warship it can be. But it's still just one ship against 50, Chen protested. One ship with impossible physics backing it up, Okafor corrected. Admiral, the Hegemony has ruled the galaxy for thousands of years because they had superior technology. But technology becomes meaningless when your enemy can rewrite the rules of reality. President Williams stood up. Captain, I need to understand something. If this device is so powerful, why did the architects hide it away? Why didn't they use it to become masters of the galaxy? Okafor was quiet for a long moment. Because they were wise enough to understand what we're just beginning to learn. Power like this changes you. Every time we use the engine, we become a little less human and a little more something else. The architects eventually realized that transcending physical reality meant giving up what made them who they were. So they hid the engine and disappeared, leaving only warnings about its use. Warnings? Dr. Kim asked. The architect database is very clear, Vasquez said. The synthesis engine should only be used by species that are mentally and morally ready for godlike power. They left tests, challenges that any species would have to overcome before they could access the device. And humanity passed these tests? Williams asked. We survived them, Okafor said. Half our crew died in the process. But those of us who remained learned something important. Power means nothing without wisdom. The Hegemony wants the engine because they think it will let them rule forever. They don't understand that true power comes from knowing when not to use it. An alarm began ringing. Admiral Chen looked at his communication device and frowned. The Hegemony fleet has arrived at the edge of the solar system, he reported. They're demanding we surrender the forbidden artifact immediately. Let them come, Okafor said. It's time to show the galaxy that humanity isn't afraid anymore. President Williams looked around the room at the faces of his advisors. Captain, if we do this, if we use this device to fight the Hegemony, there's no going back. They'll never leave us alone. Mr. President, Okafor said. They were never going to leave us alone anyway. The only difference is that now we have a choice about what happens next. Through the window, they could see more human ships approaching the station. As they entered the synthesis engine's field of influence, they began to change and adapt, becoming sleeker and more powerful. Earth's small defense fleet was transforming into something that had never existed before. The question isn't whether we should fight, Okafor continued. The question is whether we're ready to accept the responsibility that comes with winning. Chancellor Kexthul of the Hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive ship was over 5 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Around him, 49 other Hegemony vessels formed an impressive battle formation at the edge of Earth's solar system. The Chancellor was a crystalline being, his body made of living mineral that reflected light in patterns that showed his emotions. Right now, those patterns showed anger and fear in equal measure. In all his centuries of life, he had never felt the energy signature that was coming from Earth. Communications officer, open a channel to the human leadership, he commanded. His voice resonated through the crystal formations on his chest, creating a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The main screen showed Admiral Chen and President William standing in what appeared to be a space station. Behind them, Kexthul could see a device that made his crystalline body ring with harmonic fear. The synthesis engine, the unmaker of worlds, the device his people had searched for across the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Humans, Kexthul said, trying to keep his voice steady. I am Chancellor Kexthul of the Galactic Hegemony. You possess an artifact that is forbidden by galactic law. You will surrender it immediately or face the consequences. President Williams stepped forward. Chancellor, Earth is no longer subject to hegemony law. We withdrew from your protection treaty as of 1 hour ago. You cannot withdraw, Kexthul said, his crystal body flashing red with anger. No species has ever left the protection of the hegemony voluntarily. Then we're the first, Admiral Chen said. And we suggest you leave our space immediately. Kexthul looked at the readings his sensors were giving him. The human ships in the area were showing energy signatures that made no sense. Their small defense fleet, which should have been no match for even one hegemony cruiser, was reading as more powerful than his entire fleet combined. Humans, you do not understand what you have found, he said. The device you possess has destroyed entire civilizations. It is too dangerous for any single species to control. You mean it's too dangerous for you to let anyone else control it? Came a new voice. Captain Okafor appeared on the screen next to the human leaders. We know about the Dominion, Chancellor. We know how your people really came to power. Kexthul's crystal body went completely dark for a moment. The Dominion was a secret the Hegemony had kept for thousands of years. How could these primitive humans know about their former masters? I don't know what lies you think you have discovered, he said carefully. But the past is irrelevant. What matters is that you surrender the Unmaker before it destroys you and everyone around you. The only thing that's going to be destroyed here is your fleet if you don't leave, Captain Okafor said. But since you seem to need a demonstration of what we're capable of, I'll give you one. The screen went dark. Kexthul turned to his weapons officer. Target the human space station. We will take the device by force. Sir, the weapons officer said, I'm detecting 3 human destroyers moving to intercept us. Kexthul laughed, a sound like breaking glass. 3 destroyers against my entire fleet? These humans have lost their minds. Target the lead ship and destroy it. On his tactical display, Kexthul could see the human ships approaching. They were small, probably carrying no more than 50 crew members each. His own flagship carried over 10,000 soldiers and enough weapons to level a city. Sir, the human ships are changing, his science officer reported. Kexthul looked at the display more carefully. The human destroyers were indeed changing. Their hulls were becoming smoother and more angular. Weapon ports were appearing where there had been empty hull plating. The ship seemed to be growing larger and more dangerous as he watched. Impossible, he muttered. Ships don't just reshape themselves. Sir, the lead human ship is hailing us, the communications officer said. Put them through. A human appeared on the screen. He looked young, maybe 30 years old, with the confident expression of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Hegemony vessel, this is Commander Rodriguez of the UES Defiance. You have 10 seconds to power down your weapons and withdraw from this system. Kexthul's body flashed bright red. Human, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now and I might let your species live. Wrong answer, Rodriguez said, and the screen went dark. What happened next defied everything Kexthul thought he knew about space combat. The 3 human destroyers moved faster than should have been possible, covering the distance between the fleets in seconds rather than minutes. Their weapons fired beams of energy that seemed to bend space itself, traveling in curved lines that made targeting calculations meaningless. The first shots hit the Eternal Dominion with impossible force. Shields that could withstand the combined firepower of an entire fleet flickered and died instantly. The massive ship's armor, forged from the strongest materials in the galaxy, began to peel away like paper. "Return fire," Kexthul screamed. His fleet's weapons opened up on the human ships. Thousands of energy beams and missiles filled the space between the fleets. But when the light faded, the 3 human destroyers were completely untouched. Their shields hadn't even flickered. "How is this possible?" Kexthul's tactical officer whispered. "The synthesis engine," Kexthul said, his voice filled with awe and terror. "It's making their ships operate under different physical laws." The human ships continued their attack. One of the destroyers fired a single shot that passed through 3 Hegemony cruisers in a row, each ship exploding as the energy beam somehow multiplied its power with each target it hit. Another destroyer launched missiles that split into hundreds of smaller projectiles, each one seeking out a different target with perfect accuracy. But it was the 3rd destroyer that did something truly impossible. It fired a weapon that seemed to reverse time around its target. A Hegemony battleship that had been hit began to age rapidly, its hull growing old and brittle in seconds before crumbling into dust. "Chancellor," his weapons officer called out. "We've lost 15 ships in the first minute of combat. Our weapons aren't even scratching their hulls." Kexthul watched in horror as his carefully assembled fleet was torn apart by 3 ships that shouldn't have been able to defeat even one of his cruisers. The humans weren't just winning, they were playing with physics itself, making their weapons do things that violated the fundamental laws of the universe. "All ships, withdraw," he ordered. "Full retreat!" But even retreat was difficult. The human ships seemed to be able to move through space in ways that made pursuit impossible. They appeared and disappeared, struck from impossible angles, and seemed to ignore the normal limitations of acceleration and momentum. Within 4 minutes of the start of the battle, 27 Hegemony ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining fleet limped away from Earth's solar system, their confidence in Hegemony superiority shattered forever. Kexthul stood on his damaged bridge, staring at the readings from the battle. The humans had just done the impossible. They had defeated a Hegemony fleet with minimal forces and no losses of their own. "Communications," he said quietly. "Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we have a code black situation. The humans have found the synthesis engine and they know how to use it." He paused, looking back at Earth's solar system one more time. "Tell them the galaxy is about to change. Whether it changes for the better or worse depends on what kind of species these humans really are." As his fleet retreated, Kexthul couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed the end of the Hegemony's reign. For the first time in thousands of years, there was a power in the galaxy that could challenge them, and that power was in the hands of a species that had been slaves just hours before. The question now was what humanity would do with their newfound strength. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy, faster than light itself. In the depths of space, on worlds that had been under Hegemony rule for centuries, beings who had never heard of Earth suddenly whispered the name with hope and fear. On the ocean world of Aquanus, the fish-like cetaceans who had been forced to give up their deep-sea cities gathered in secret councils. Elder Fintalor raised his massive head above the water and spoke to the assembled crowds. "The small mammals from the third world have done what we thought impossible," he sang in the harmonic language of his people. "They have made the Hegemony flee in fear. Perhaps the time of hiding is over." On the desert planet of Xerion, the crystal-skinned lithoids emerged from their underground shelters for the first time in decades. Their leader, core singer Zephanos, felt vibrations through the planetary crust that told him something fundamental had changed in the galactic power structure. "The Earth Song carries news," he announced to his people. "The dominators have been challenged and found wanting. The cycle of oppression may finally be ending." Even in the Hegemony's core worlds there was unrest. Species that had been loyal members of the galactic government began to question orders for the first time in centuries. The defeat of Chancellor Kexthul's fleet had shown that the Hegemony was not invincible after all. Back on Earth, Captain Okafor stood in the expanded briefing room of the defense station. The room was now filled with leaders from every major Earth nation, as well as scientists and military officers who were trying to understand what had just happened. "The demonstration was necessary," she explained to the assembled group. "The galaxy needed to see that the old rules no longer apply. But now comes the hard part." President Williams looked tired. The events of the past day had aged him considerably. Captain, we've just made enemies of the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. What happens when they come back with a bigger fleet? They won't, Dr. Vasquez said from her position near the synthesis engine. At least not soon. The defeat we just handed them has created a crisis in the Hegemony government. Our intelligence intercepts suggest they're facing rebellions on dozens of worlds. Admiral Chen pulled up a holographic display of the galaxy. Red dots marked Hegemony worlds, while blue dots showed independent systems. According to our long-range sensors, there are already 3 star systems that have declared independence from the Hegemony since news of our victory reached them. But there's something else, Okafor said, her expression growing darker. Something we learned from the Architect database that makes our situation much more complicated. She activated a new display that showed star charts unlike anything the Earth leaders had seen before. The images showed massive ships moving through dark space beyond the galaxy's edge. The Hegemony isn't the greatest threat in the universe, she continued. There's something else out there. Something called the Devourers. What are they? Asked Dr. Sarah Kim. Machine intelligences from outside our galaxy, Vasquez explained. According to the Architect records, they consume entire civilizations, turning organic life into raw materials for their expansion. The Hegemony has been keeping them at bay for centuries, but barely. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. You're saying the Hegemony has been protecting the galaxy? President Williams asked. In their own way, yes, Okafor admitted. The Architect database shows that the Devourers have been probing our galaxy's defenses for thousands of years. The Hegemony's military strength was the main thing keeping them from invading. And now we've weakened that military strength, Chen said grimly. Worse than that, Okafor said. Our intelligence intercepts suggest that Chancellor Kexthul is so desperate to regain the synthesis engine that he's considering an alliance with the Devourers themselves. The room erupted in shocked voices. The idea of the Hegemony allying with machine intelligences from outside the galaxy was horrifying. That's madness, Dr. Kim said. Why would they ally with something that wants to destroy all organic life? Because they believe they can control the Devourers long enough to defeat us and take the synthesis engine, Vasquez explained. They think that with the engine's power, they can eventually turn on their mechanical allies and destroy them. Can they? Williams asked. Maybe, Okafor said. But more likely, they'll just give the Devourers a foothold in our galaxy. Once that happens, it might be impossible to stop them. Admiral Chen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the transformed human fleet. The ships were still changing and adapting, becoming more powerful with each passing hour as the synthesis engine's influence grew stronger. So we have a choice, he said. We can try to negotiate with the Hegemony, return the device, and go back to being their subjects. Or we can keep the device and risk a war that might destroy the entire galaxy. There's a third option, Okafor said quietly, which is, we use the synthesis engine to become strong enough to protect the galaxy ourselves. We take over the Hegemony's role as guardians against the Devourers. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. President Williams looked around the room at his advisors and allies. Captain, humanity has been a spacefaring species for less than a century. You're suggesting we take responsibility for defending billions of civilizations across the galaxy. The Architects faced the same choice, Okafor said. They had the power to reshape reality itself, but they chose to hide from responsibility instead. Look what happened. The galaxy fell under the control of species who cared more about power than protection. But the Architects were billions of years old, Dr. Kim protested. They had evolved beyond physical needs and desires. Humanity is still human. We still make mistakes. We still fight among ourselves. Which is exactly why we might succeed where they failed, Vasquez said. The Architects became so advanced that they lost touch with what it meant to struggle, to fight for survival. Humanity still remembers what it's like to be weak. That might make us better protectors than species who have forgotten what it means to need protection. An alarm began ringing. Admiral Chen checked his communication device and frowned. Long-range sensors are detecting massive movement in the outer galaxy, he reported. Ships are moving toward our position from beyond the galactic rim. How many ships? President Williams asked. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. And they're not showing any energy signatures we recognize. Okafor closed her eyes. The Devourers. Kexthul actually did it. He contacted them. How long do we have? Williams asked. Based on their current speed, maybe 2 weeks before the first scouts reach the outer systems. The main force will be another month behind them. The room was quiet as everyone absorbed this information. Humanity had gone from being a protected species to the galaxy's only hope for survival in less than 24 hours. "Mr. President," Okafor said, "I need you to make a decision. Do we use the synthesis engine to protect only Earth and let the rest of the galaxy fall? Or do we try to save everyone? Even the species that kept us enslaved for 23 years. President Williams looked around the room one more time. His advisors were split. Some wanted to protect only humanity, while others argued for a broader defense of the galaxy. "Captain," he said finally, "what do you think the right choice is?" Okafor smiled sadly. "I think the right choice is the one that lets us sleep at night. And I know I couldn't sleep knowing we had the power to save billions of lives but chose not to use it." Williams nodded slowly. "Then I guess we're about to find out what humanity is really made of." The battle for the galaxy began in the Proxima Centauri system, where humanity had built their first colony beyond Earth. It was here that the combined forces of the Hegemony and the Devourers chose to make their stand, believing that destroying humanity's newest settlement would break their spirit. Captain Okafor stood on the bridge of the Meridian, watching as enemy ships filled the space around Proxima. The Hegemony had brought everything they had left, over 800 warships representing dozens of species who still believed in their cause. But it was the Devourer ships that truly inspired fear. The mechanical vessels were unlike anything in the galaxy. They moved like living things, their hulls rippling and changing shape as they flew. Some were massive, the size of small moons, while others darted through space like mechanical insects. All of them radiated a cold intelligence that made human sensors scream warnings. "Captain," Commander Rodriguez called from the tactical station, "we count approximately 3,000 enemy vessels. Our fleet numbers 147 ships." "Numbers don't matter anymore," Okafor replied. "Dr. Vasquez, is the engine ready for full activation?" "Ready, Captain," came the reply from the science station. "But I have to warn you again. Activating it at this level will change us. All of us. We might not be quite human when this is over." Okafor nodded. She had felt the changes already, as had everyone who had spent time near the active synthesis engine. Their minds worked faster. Their reflexes were sharper, and they could understand complex physics equations that would have been impossible before. They were becoming something more than human, and there was no going back. "All ships, this is Admiral Okafor," she said into the fleet communication system. She had been promoted just hours before the battle began. "Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every free species in the galaxy. Remember, we're not just soldiers anymore. We're guardians." The synthesis engine, now moved to the center of the human fleet, began to glow with brilliant light. Reality itself seemed to shimmer and bend around it as its influence expanded to cover the entire battle zone. Within the engine's field, the human ships began to transform. But this time the changes were far more dramatic than before. The vessels didn't just become more powerful. They began to operate according to principles that redefined what a starship could be. Commander Sarah Chen, captain of the destroyer Resilience, watched in amazement as her ship's weapon systems changed before her eyes. Her plasma cannons became something entirely new, weapons that could fire bursts of contained gravity, creating black holes that lasted just long enough to tear enemy ships apart. All weapon systems showing impossible readings. Her tactical officer reported with excitement, "Captain, I think we can actually fire bullets made of compressed time." "Then let's see what they do," Chen replied. The Devourer fleet moved first, their mechanical minds calculating that they had overwhelming numerical superiority. Thousands of ships surged forward, their weapons charging with energy levels that could crack planets. But as they entered the synthesis engine's field of influence, something unexpected happened. The mechanical ships began to malfunction. Their perfectly logical systems couldn't process a reality where logic itself was flexible. Ships that had operated flawlessly for centuries suddenly found their computers overwhelmed by calculations that produced impossible results. "The Devourers are having trouble adapting to altered physics," Dr. Vasquez reported with satisfaction. "Their programming can't handle reality that doesn't follow consistent rules." The human fleet engaged the enemy with weapons and tactics that had never existed before. Ships phased in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy vessels before anyone could react. Human pilots discovered they could think their ships through maneuvers that should have torn their vessels apart, but instead made them dance through space like living creatures. Captain Marcus Webb of the cruiser Determination found that his ship could split into multiple copies of itself, each one real and solid, allowing him to attack from 5 directions at once. When the battle was over, the copies merged back together, somehow stronger than before. The Hegemony fleet, caught between the malfunctioning Devourers and the impossibly advanced human ships, began to break apart. Many vessels simply stopped fighting and broadcasted surrender signals. Others tried to flee, only to find human ships appearing in front of them no matter which direction they turned. Chancellor Kex Thule, commanding from his rebuilt flagship, watched his carefully planned assault fall apart in minutes. The Devourers, his mechanical allies, were proving to be more of a liability than an asset, as their ships collided with each other and fired on empty space. "This is impossible," he said to his bridge crew. "No species should be able to rewrite reality itself." "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Okafor appeared on his screen, but she looked different than before. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through space itself. "Chancellor Kex Thule," she said, "this battle is over. Your Devourer allies are retreating back to dark space and your own fleet is surrendering. But I'm offering you something better than defeat." "What do you mean?" Kex Thule asked. "Join us," Okafor said simply. "Help us build a new kind of galactic civilization, one where species work together instead of one ruling over all the others." Kex Thule's crystalline body rang with confusion. "You would trust us after we tried to destroy you?" "The Architect's database showed us something important," Okafor replied. "Every species makes mistakes. Every civilization goes through periods of conquest and oppression. What matters is whether you can learn from those mistakes and become something better." Around the battle zone, the fighting was winding down. Human ships were helping damaged Hegemony vessels, providing medical aid and repairs to former enemies. The Devourer fleet had indeed retreated, their mechanical minds unable to process the reality-altering effects of the synthesis engine. "But the device you possess," Kex Thule said, "surely you will use it to rule as we did." "No," Okafor said, and her image was joined by President Williams, Admiral Chen, and representatives from dozens of other species. "We're going to do something that's never been tried before. We're going to share it." The revelation sent shockwaves through both fleets. No species in galactic history had ever willingly shared ultimate power. "The synthesis engine doesn't have to be controlled by one group," Dr. Vasquez explained, appearing on the communication channel. "Its influence can be extended to any species that proves they're ready for the responsibility. We're going to create a galactic confederation where every member species has access to enhanced technology, but only if they agree to use it for protection and exploration, not conquest." "You would give this power to your former enemies?" Kex Thule asked in amazement. "Power shared is power strengthened," Okafor replied. "The Architects failed because they tried to handle ultimate responsibility alone. We're going to succeed by making sure no one has to carry that burden by themselves." Over the following weeks, representatives from hundreds of species arrived at Proxima Centauri to witness the formation of the Galactic Confederation. The synthesis engine was moved to a neutral station where it could extend its influence across multiple star systems, allowing member species to benefit from enhanced physics while preventing any one group from controlling it completely. The Hegemony officially dissolved itself, with its member species choosing to join the new confederation as equals rather than rulers. Chancellor Kex Thule himself became the Confederation's first Minister of Reconciliation, helping former subject species adapt to their newfound freedom. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in humanity itself. The prolonged exposure to the synthesis engine had indeed transformed them, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of becoming cold and distant like the Architects, humans had become more empathetic, more connected to the other species around them. Their enhanced minds allowed them to understand alien perspectives in ways that had never been possible before. Captain Okafor, now Admiral of the Confederation fleet, stood on the observation deck of the new headquarters station, watching as ships from dozens of different species worked together to explore previously unknown regions of the galaxy. Human vessels flew alongside Hegemony cruisers, cetacean deep space explorers, and lithoid mining ships, all of them enhanced by technology that had once been thought impossible. "The device that shouldn't exist," she said to Dr. Vasquez, who stood beside her. "Turns out it existed for exactly this purpose. To bring the galaxy together?" Vasquez asked. "To show us that impossible just means we haven't figured out how to do it yet," Okafor replied. "The architects thought they had to choose between power and wisdom. We found a third option, sharing both. In the distance, the synthesis engine glowed softly in its protective chamber, its influence spreading further each day as more species proved themselves ready for enhanced reality. The galaxy had found a new way forward, one where the impossible became routine and where former enemies became partners in building something greater than any of them could achieve alone.